Hello guys, in this video I'm going to start working or continue working with Python on Google Colab and start where we left off last time. So if you've noticed here on Moodle week 11, June 15th, makeup class, and I have the makeup class folder where if you open it, you will get access to the makeup class file. This file is basically a file where we can open and start working with me where we left off last time. So let me go to Google Colab, and over here I'm going to go to upload, and wherever you have the file saved, you can just upload the file and basically open it with Google Colab to start working with me on today's lecture. In fact, this file also includes all the code that we've done in the previous class. So if you haven't had the time to do it, then please do. And of course, in class, I have provided the solution for the assignment. All right, let's get started. Probably have to write a note to put the solution of the assignment on Moodle. In any case, let's get started. So we are going to work first with the changing the variable type. So first of all, I'm going to work with changing the variable type. So variable type conversion. And now let's get started. All right, we can in fact let me just do something. Okay, let's be in the center here or at the very top. Perfect. So let's convert from one type of variable to another, and this is done as follows. If we have declared a variable x assigned 1 to it, we already know that this is an integer type. So of course, one of the things that I wanted to also say is you can add a comment just adjacent to the same line of the code, and it will be just fine, just like in any other programming language. Y is equal to 2.8, let's say, and this data type is called float. Okay, and then we have z, and z is declared to be let's say 1j. Of course, some of you probably have not worked with complex numbers in mathematics, but complex numbers, as you can see, it is 1j or. So it is multiple values or multiple data types together. So this is a complex. So let's say that we would like to know the data type. So let's say type of z. What would that be? It's a complex. You can do similarly type of y and so on, and try to take a look to verify that I have specified the correct type. Okay, let's move on to how to convert that. So let me just put this as in z so that if I share the file, you will be introduced to the complex. Okay, convert. Let's start by converting from an integer to a float. So we do that by saying, for example, a, let's say a, we have x, y, z. Okay, so I can declare a as a variable. A is in fact a float of an unfloat integer. So let's say that x, now we verified that the type of x is integer. So I want to convert it to a float. So float x, this float x, so using just a float will convert the variable in parentheses. So we agreed that any function in Python, just like any other programming language, will take arguments by opening up two brackets. You can see here args, arguments. So over here, I'm gonna feed into this float x, which is a not float number, and see how I can obtain a float. Now, regardless of this programming language, very basic questions, mathematical question. If 1 in this form is an integer, what is its float form? What is float? A float is any number that has decimals. So basically a float will look like that, 1.0. So we will add the decimal place, and since there's no decimals, the decimal place is equal to 0. This is my expectations. Let's see if this is correct. So now, oh, there is a problem. What is the problem? Let's take a look. A is equal float of x. The problem, you would be very surprised to know that the problem is here. I have too much of a space for convert from integer to float. A is equal to float. I think maybe here, do I have to? A indentation. Oh man, how did I get the indentation? Do you see? Indentation error. I don't know. I don't even know how I got the indentation. So as I told you earlier, or have I covered indentation with Python? If I haven't, I need to say that it's very good that this problem has occurred here. Indentation is basically the space from the beginning of the cell or the paragraph in Word document, for example, all the way to wherever. So this we call it indentation. In coding languages, for example, C, Java, and so forth, indentation for us as a programmer or HTML even, it's not mandatory. It is done for the purpose of readability of the code. And when I teach, for example, search engine optimization, I tell them the idea of indentation is for the engine, the Google engine, the algorithm, the crawler, to read your HTML code and understand that this code, through the indentation, can understand or easily pinpoint certain blocks, long blocks of code. And it's easier for the crawler, the program, to read the page, because the crawler can't read the page that we read, this kind of page in characters. All programming languages are similar. They just use indentation for readability. Python, on the other hand, not all but most programming languages, the popular one, because I'm not aware of any other programming language like Python that uses actually indentation. It's a must, and it will prompt you a syntax error. So this is unexpected indent. So this will prompt you an error if there is an indentation. Sorry, now that I read the error very carefully, I understood what the problem is. I thought that probably there was too much spacing here. Actually, I never do. I always keep one space and it still works, so I was really surprised. The more programming languages that you practice with, the more confused you get, because each programming language has its rules. All right, interesting, isn't it? So indentation is very important with Python. Next, let's convert from a float to integer. So which number is a float here is the y. Y is a float, it has decimal. Now you want to convert it into integer. Please try on your own, pause my video, and then come back to me. All right, so let's say that we have b. We're going to store the result in b. And now we are going to say integer, and what is the float number is y. So before you run the code, what do you think the result will look like? I think the result will look like something like that. The integer will be 2, and we will drop the 0.8, the 0.8. Okay, so let's return the results by typing b. And now, as you can see, we have 2 as a result. All right, very good. Okay, so now let's take a look at converting, excuse me, converting from, for example, integer to complex. Let's take a look. So over here we have, let's do that. Convert integer to complex. This is just for students who are more into mathematics and very advanced mathematics. C is equal to complex of x, for example, and then even C. On the other hand, if you add the float here, it's going to be 2.8 plus 0j. So whichever one, it's going to be put as an integer here, a complex number. All right, so now if you wanna practice more, you can do something like a print b and type of b, and that would be 2 class integer. The type is integer. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about casting with Python. So there are many. There may be times when you want to specify a type onto a variable. This can be done with casting. Python is an object-oriented language, and as such, it uses classes to define data types, and including its primitive types, of course. Casting in Python is therefore done using constructor functions. For example, you say int, and in between brackets, you type in the integer. So this is, for example, what we've done just now. So we use the int function for integer conversion. And for example, this function constructs an integer number from an integer literal, and the float literal by removing all decimals, or a string literal, providing the string represents the string that represents a whole number. For the float, for example, it constructs a float number from an integer literal, and a float literal or string literal, providing the string represents a float or an integer, and so on. And there is a string in between the brackets, and the string in between the brackets constructs a string from a wide variety of data types, including strings, integer, literals, and float literals. So please try to take a look and just to practice. For example, you can do something like x is equal to integer 1, and that would be 1. So there is no really integer 0.23, for example. And then y is equal an integer of 2.8, for example. This makes sense. So y will be 2. Z will be equal to integer, for example, this time it is here 3, and that will be 3. Let's say take a look at, first of all, this is z, and let's take a look at z. What would be the answer? Remember that this is 3, of a string type. So this is z. All right. So having this said, a float of 1 will be 1.0, a float of 2.8 will be 2.8, a float of 3 will be 3, or even an integer. Let's take a look here. Integer 3 is a 3. Let's see what's going to happen if this is a float. Let's see what happens. 3.0. Okay, as expected. All right, getting a random number. Let's talk a little bit about getting a random number. Why do I do that? Because in most of the, at your own, or maybe in the future, you're gonna do some tutorials with Python. So sometimes you just want to work with a set of data because you want to work on some statistical analysis, like you want to see how to get the mean, the standard deviation on some other statistical readings. So basically what happens is you want to just create a random set of data. You don't have one, and you just want to create a random set of data. This is not what we're doing right now, but Let me just tell you that there is something, some library, we call it random here, import random, and then you can just say print random dot rand range, and here from 1 to 10, and this is it. You are going to get a random number though, so in a range from 1 to 10, so you're going to get only one random number. So over here I got the random number to be 8. Maybe you are going to get 7 or 1 or 2. So this is completely random. So yeah, we usually use that when we want to get a normal distribution. So let's take a look here at the strings, for example. Would like to show you something interesting for strings. This is just a collection of things. Strings in Python. If you are wondering now, why did I skip strings data type or strings conversion and all that? Strings usually in Python are in fact arrays. So they are arrays. So if you say hello world and over like that, then basically what happens is if you want to print the first letter or the second letter. If you want to in fact print the first letter, then which index you should add? I will tell you. H is the first letter, and its index, its serial number is 0. So arrays in Python starts numbering with 0. So if you want to type, or if you want to return the first letter, of course you are going, if you type in here 1, it will not give you the first letter. I'm telling you now, it's going to give you E. It's going to give you E. So this is the kind of things I'm going to ask you in the quiz. Return the last letter of this sentence, return of this word, return the first letter of this word. So how are you going to return that first letter, which is H? Then you just here use index 0. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about Python conditions and if statements in the next video. Thank you so much.